All right, everyone. Welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 1 first recap video of this year that is, in all its glory, 2020. Little Adams family there because we were paying recognition to Davante Adams, who had the statistical game of his career to open up the season here in Week 1 and push Yinzer Jags all the way to first, perhaps temporary, perhaps permanent first place. I don't know. Only time will tell what's going to happen there. But yeah, little credit where credit is due. He went for, I think, 14 catches. I believe that was tied the franchise record. 2 touchdowns. His yardage wasn't too crazy, I think. But yeah, he still got you about 42, 44 points, something like that. So yeah, welcome to the team, I guess. Having the best game of his career right out of the gate. So setting your expectations high is what he's doing for things to come. So lofty expectations. Will he be able to fulfill them as the season continues? So much for the Packers being a run-first team, I guess. I don't know, unless it is Davante Adams, the target of most of Aaron Rodgers' passes there. But hey, why do I keep talking about Davante Adams? Because nobody cares to listen about Detling's team. They don't care. They saw what happened. They know. They don't want to hear about my team. They saw what happened. They know. They don't care. So, what should we get into first? We had a good draft this year. A couple people, did they sleep in or did they just not want to drive to the draft? I don't know. Who knows? But yeah. Maybe, hopefully, it's not setting a precedent for future league travelers to just decide that they don't feel like going in the future. I mean, hey, we understand. We used to never actually all get together. It's a luxury that we've been fortunate enough to be able to do for many years now, probably at least 10 years or so. It's been a pretty good and faithful running tradition that we've kept. And yeah, it's always good to get together with a lot of people who this is where we only see each other and can talk to each other. Not that we're not friends or anything, but like when it really comes down to it, this is where we get together during the course of the year and butt heads in Tonto's Demise. But I think that I think the older you get and as time goes on, we're approaching 20 years of Tonto's Demise. So every time we all get together, just to be it all together and to have a good time, get everyone and see your faces, get to actually talk to you and interact. It's always a good time, and I think we all appreciate the camaraderie, and again, just I think you appreciate just having that opportunity to all get together once again. As the years go by, it gets more important that we all see each other and take care of each other in friendship terms, and make sure everybody's doing okay. We're all looking out for each other. In the real world, we may combat and butt heads again on the fantasy football field. But in the football field of life, we are all on the same team, guys. So, anyway, Gags, thank you for hosting the draft. Everything was nice. Food was wonderful, as always. Let's see. A little bit of rain, but it wasn't too hot. Didn't really cause any problems. The Zoom meetings, everybody seemed to go pretty smooth. And the draft went pretty quickly, I thought, compared to previous years for whatever reasons. I don't know. Really not sure the one extra keeper affected it too much, but yeah, everybody was on their toes and kept things moving pretty well. So yeah, we head into 2020, a year with a lot of question marks. I think um, there was really no preseason, very little training camp, a lot of really just hard to get any information on who's looking good or actually being able to see it with your own eyes. Who's who are the up and comers this year? A lot of times people get drafted based on some big plays that they make in those preseason games, which we didn't get this year. So it made it kind of difficult to assess maybe the younger talent. So I think a lot of the draft had to do with taking people you know and maybe taking less gambles on uncertainties just to see what happens because yeah, we're going into it with not much information, which hopefully will never happen again. We're going to try to deal, hopefully, we don't have any incidents with COVID-19 and players or teams. We will obviously assess each situation as it presents itself and try to make the best of whatever happens. But I think the NFL seem to be have been handling it pretty well. The one running back from the Jaguars, I think, is about the only person currently that I can think of who has any sort of COVID-related, I don't want to say injury, but away time right now. So we will keep our fingers crossed and hope that that continues. A lot of people said about training camp. Week 1 was kind of tough here. We had a lot of people, a lot of teams have injuries to some players, injuries that kept them out of Week 1, and also some injuries that happened during Week 1 that I don't know that they really shifted a lot of matchups, but as people go down, it's going to be more difficult to keep your fine players off the waiver wire to fill those holes that pop up in your starting lineup and in your bench there. As you all know, we increased the transaction total for this year, and I think because what it seems is the NFL must have done something with their IR that teams are able to have much more free range to put people on IR and bring them off IR this year. I think Le'Veon Bell just went on IR 3 weeks or whatever that means for his injuries. So that means a lot of people are probably going to have more than usual players who get put with the IR tag instead of just the O tag. But still, I think it shouldn't be. I mean, these aren't any sort of COVID-related problems. So just remember that while you still have 6 IR slots, only 2 of them are allowed to be used for actually injured players. All the rest of those spots are there as just in case precautions for anything that might come up in terms of COVID-19. It was the hope that we could try to be as prepared as we possibly could for what might come up, but we still have to wait and see how things play out. And again, we will tackle things as we get to them and as they come up, and we will try to do it in the fairest way possible. Hopefully we actually get through a whole season, have a season, get through the Tonto Bowl. Hey, as long as we get to week 16, that's all that matters, right? As long as we get to Christmas. So anyway, thank you, Gags, for hosting. We will see. Hopefully you won't be hosting again next year because that would mean back-to-back championships, and you would win the back-to-back champions pot, which only had a couple years to grow, so it's probably not worth winning yet. But hey, money is money, and we don't want to start over again before it reaches probably a more significant amount. So something to remember and keep in mind when you're going up against Gags. You don't want him to win that back-to-back champion pot. Not to mention the fact that he already has, 3 Tonto Bowls under his belt, or Tonto Bowl championships under his belt already? So he is putting the rest of the league, especially the people who have been here from day one, kind of to shame. So, anyway, speaking of Gags and the championship, as always, I guess we should get down to talking about week 1. And as always, we start with the defending champion, which is Gags to Riches. Let's take a look. Where is he at here? He went up against Disco this week. And from Gags to Riches, starts out his championship defense with a narrow victory over Disco. Final score here, 156.55 to 150.95. So only a 5.5 point victory here, despite the fact that, Disco was missing Miles Sanders and Kenny Golladay. Brandon Cooks, I believe, was battling an injury, playing through an injury, so they didn't think that he was going to get much attention from Watson in week 1 there, which he did not. So he was on the bench. All these guys riding the bench for Disco this week. A couple people, again, normally would have been starters, perhaps most likely turned the tide in this matchup here, even if you had tried to go with Brandon Cooks over Christian Kirk. It was only a 3-point difference between those two guys, 4 and 1, so it wouldn't have mattered there. But there really wasn't much, I think, that Disco could have done otherwise. Except, you could have started J.K. Dobbins instead of Chris Thompson. But, saying that now seems obvious and easy. But before the matchup, not so much. Chris Thompson, obviously, all his stats came from catches and receiving, so that's an ideal spot to have a running back who's going to get you not only probably some rushing yards, but also pile up some catches there. Maybe get a touchdown and get you a little bit more fantasy points than what Chris Thompson did here in week 1. But anyway, as Gags would say, it is what it is, and he gets the win. Let's see. We had, for Gags to Riches, Deshaun Watson goes for about 42.5. Julio Jones, no touchdowns, but he gets you almost 28 points. T.Y. Hilton, 9.5. A.J. Brown, about 9 points. Tariq Cohen and Kerryon Johnson, your running backs. Tariq Cohen actually gets you more points from rushing than receiving this week at 6.7. Kerryon Johnson only goes for 14 yards, 1.4. Travis Kelce, good game for him, 17 points. In the flex, you went with A.J. Green. Looks like he got you just over 10 points. Justin Tucker, your kicker, looks like about 9.5, 10 points or so. And then the Chargers defense. Yahoo says 15. Judging by the bump, they must have been about 21 or 23, something like that. But yeah, 156, enough to get past Disco. Actually, this matchup did come down to, I should mention, Monday night, the very last game of the week. Gags to Riches had A.J. Brown, and Disco had the Tennessee Titans defense. The difference, I believe, according to my notes, was about 13 and a half, 14 points or so. So Disco needed Tennessee to outscore A.J. Brown by 14, and I believe Tennessee's score was, 18, but Brown had 9, so it wasn't quite enough to get pull out the victory for Disco there, unfortunately. He had Tom Brady go for almost 44 points, not too bad. Godwin, 14 points. Again, Christian Kirk, only 1 point there. Paris Campbell, 14. Jonathan Taylor and Chris Thompson, again, as your 2 running backs. Taylor for 15, Thompson for 2.5. Waller, 10.5. Zeke, 2 touchdowns for him in the flex there. Almost 28 points. Your kicker, Bailey, goes for about 4.5. And again, the Titans defense, looks like they got you about 17 or 18 points there. Not quite enough to ahead of A.J. Brown's score. Gags holds on for the victory. But again, it's only 1 week here. Disco, fortunately for you, your guys didn't get hurt during the games. They were coming in with injuries already. So you kind of knew your back was up against the wall. But you got 2 players who are going to be, I would imagine, every week starters once they're healthy. So I assume it's safe to say there will be better times ahead for you down the road. So don't hang your head after 1 loss here. Although, of course, it would have been enjoyable to hang a loss on the defending champ as he starts his championship defense there. Sounds a little repetitive there, so I apologize. But anyway, Gags to Riches begins his championship defense with a victory over Disco. He is in 5th place. Disco is in 10th place. Next up, we had, let's do the Adams family. Davante Adams, Yinzer Jags, previously mentioned. He goes up against Possum Magic this week, but all of the magic was on Yinzer Jags' side this week, as he goes for a whopping 238 points to defeat Possum Magic, who had 169.65. So about a 60-something margin of victory there. Yinzer Jags, let's take a look at him. Again, he had Davante Adams, like I said, go for 44.5 points. He got over 150 yards receiving there, so you got a little bonus for that. He started with Kyler Murray at quarterback, 53.5 points. Although for quite a while, I think he had Josh Allen in his starting lineup, who actually went for 67.5 points. Would have gotten you an extra 14 and been over 250 this week. But still, 53.5 is a quarterback score I will take every week of the year, and not whine about my bench quarterback doing a little bit better. Don't say again, your receivers, Davante Adams, Adam Thielen, and Amari Cooper. Davante Adams goes for 44.5. Thielen actually goes for an even 31, which got you 75 points just between Davante Adams and Adam Thielen. I think, fortunately for the rest of the league, that's probably not going to happen every week. So, unfortunately, Possum Magic, really, you just ran into a bit of a buzzsaw this week. Just luck, the way it goes, and not too much you can do when your opponent, half their lineup goes off like this. Mari Cooper, 18.1. Raheem Mostert, actually, and James White, 2 pass-catching running backs in your running back spots here. And they did most of their damage receiving, as Mostert actually went for a 70-yard touchdown, something like that. He was one of the 2 long touchdown bonuses this week. So yeah, he actually had almost 100 receiving yards there. So with the bonus, Mostert would have gotten you just over 28 points. James White, typical for him, no touchdowns there, but he did go for 3 catches, 30 yards, and some rushing there. He got you 8.2. Kittle, only 9.3. I believe he suffered a knee injury sometime during that game. I don't know if he went back into the game, but I'm not sure of the severity of that injury here going into week 2, if it will linger, or if he's okay. We'll see if that causes any problems here for Yinzer Jags going forward, because as far as I can tell, he has no other tight ends on his roster there. So we'll see if Kittle's injury becomes a problem for you. In the flex, Tyler Boyd, kind of a disappointing performance here, only 7.3. Kicker, Butker from Kansas City, about 9 points. And then Baltimore Ravens defense had a field day against the Cleveland Browns. Yahoo says 20. I'm going to guess it must have been about 30 based on the totals there. So, yeah, it was probably 30, 28, 29, maybe 29 or 30. But you get the idea. But yeah, way more than enough to get past, unfortunately, for you, Possum Magic this week. Still 170 points, not a bad showing. You actually would have beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 other teams you would have beaten this week. But unfortunately, you went up against the number one. You had Matthew Stafford. He goes for 42, a little bit over 42. Your 3 wide receivers, Terry McLaurin, Marvin Jones, and Tyler Lockett. 11 for McLaurin, 9.5 for Marvin Jones, and Tyler Lockett just over 17. Running backs, Derrick Henry and Chris Carson. Pretty good combo there. 19 for Henry and 24.5 for Chris Carson, who I believe actually scored 2 receiving touchdowns in that game. Hayden Hurst, the new Titans, the new Austin Hooper in Atlanta there. He only had 6.5 points. Diggs in your flex goes for 16.6, not too bad. And Zane Gonzalez, I believe, let's see, he made a field goal. He missed a field goal, a couple PATs. So he must have had more than one miss there because Yahoo says 6. But yeah, he must have been about 6.5 or 7 there. And then the Kansas City defense looks like a small bump ahead. So their score says 13 on Yahoo. The actual score based on your kicker and the really the kickers and the defenses are the only spots that have to get adjusted there outside of long touchdown bonuses there. And so the actual score was probably 16, I'm going to guess, from the Kansas City Chiefs defense. But yeah, again, not too much you can do. Adams and Thielen, they go off for 75 points between 2 of them. That requires most of your lineup just to cover that 75 and leaves, the rest of Yinzer Jags players to just basically just show up and do what they should to secure an easy victory there. But again, it's only week 1, so we will see what happens going forward. Unfortunately for Possum Magic in week 1, he suffered the most in terms of injuries. They were bench players, though, but it will definitely affect your depth going forward. Even though, obviously, Possum Magic has Melvin Gordon on his bench. He'll be able to, you didn't play him. You might, your starting lineup is pretty solid. You had Diggs in the flex, so I don't know if you will keep him there or not, if you'll try to get Melvin Gordon into the lineup somehow and take out, I don't really know if you want to take out any of those receivers. So yeah, you got some questions to make there. But you have Melvin Gordon, but you lost Marlon Mack for the year, and you also lost Blake Jarwin for the year. Fortunately, you took advantage of Shawshank's mistake, I think, dropping Jared Cook earlier in the preseason here, and were able to pick him up. He had not a bad tight end performance there. I see 13 points on your bench. So yeah, I would imagine Jarwin will be going back to the waiver wire, and fortunately for you, you've got a solid backup, perhaps a future starter, if Hayden Hurst doesn't quite turn it around, which I'm sure he will eventually as the season plays on. But still, So losing Mac leaves you with Jordan Howard and Melvin Gordon on your bench there. So we'll see if Possum Magic makes any moves here on the Week 1 waiver wire, which he probably will. But I know some people don't really concern themselves too much with having depth on your bench, but I believe Tree is one of them, and he will probably make some moves here to shore up his bench there because it's a long season and you never know what's going to happen going forward. You're going to need some of those guys on your bench to fill spots. Hopefully nothing happens and your team stays healthy. I hope all of our teams stay healthy all season, but unfortunately that is usually not the way it goes. So we will see what happens what kind of moves Possum Magic makes, if he's able to make them, and perhaps other people will outbid him or make some moves and take players ahead of him that he was trying to get. So, yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens there. But anyway, Yanzer Jags, like I said, highest score of Week 1. He's in first place. In Possum Magic, he is 0-1. He is in 8th place, though. Let's go right down the line now. We have Springfield Isotopes going up against Hillbillies on PCP. This one was actually quite the unexpected slugfest, I think, as the Springfield Isotopes knock off Hillbillies on PCP. Final score 209.05 to 190.05. For Springfield Isotopes, we had Patrick Mahomes go for 46.5. Wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, Will Fuller, and Deontay Johnson. Ridley goes for 34. Fuller goes for just over 19. And Deontay goes for about 9.5 points. After starting off the game, I believe, at first I checked it, he was at -2, thanks to, I guess, a fumble on a punt return, I'm assuming, because he didn't have any actual receiving stats or anything at that time. So yeah, not too bad there. Running backs, Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara. 17.5 for Jones, 23.7 for Kamara. Noah Fant on Monday night, 19.1. Philip Lindsay in the flex, only 4.5 points though before going out with a foot injury, which apparently is not too serious. So hopefully he will be back pretty soon. Kicker, Suck Up from Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay actually kind of was underperformed. Looked a bit out of sorts in this one, in Week 1 here, with Tom Brady and his new team there. But I think that's what has been going on for the past 5 years with New England anyway. They always said, in the first couple weeks of the season, New England looks like they're done, they're out of it, they don't know what they're doing, they're out of sorts, they can't, they're miscommunicating on all these things. Tom Brady's washed up, but and then after a few weeks into the season, they start getting things cranking, and start piling up victories here. So too many weapons for Tampa Bay, I think, to stay as bad as they looked on Sunday there. I think the Saints defense had a lot to do with it, as much as Tom Brady still working out the kinks with his new teammates there. So Buffalo defense, they went for about, let's see, Yahoo says 15. Actual score must have been about 27-ish. I think both of our defenses, we had a lot of scores very similar this week. I think both of our defenses actually might have scored 27, something like that here. Because, okay, we got through the Isotopes. Let's go through Hillbillies on PCP. Again, like I said, a lot of scores were actually pretty similar here. Roethlisberger, he goes for 45.5, only 1 point less than Mahomes there. Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf, and Jerry Jeudy. Allen goes for 7.7, and then DK Metcalf, he goes for 19.5, 0.3 more than Fuller, and then Jeudy, he goes for 9.6, which is only 0.1 less than Deontay Johnson. So the quarterbacks and two of our wide receivers basically scored the same totals there. But you had Dalvin Cook and Josh Jacobs. Cook, he had 2 touchdowns. Jacobs had 3 touchdowns. Cook almost 22 points there, and Josh Jacobs just under 36. Hunter Henry, your tight end, goes for 12.3. Perhaps a difference maker in this matchup. Not quite sure. It's a 19-point margin of victory here. Le'Veon Bell gets you 6.5 points before going out with an injury. I'm not sure Le'Veon could have actually gotten you 20 up all the way up to 25, especially at Buffalo. They were getting beat pretty badly most of the game, so I think even if Le'Veon Bell had played the full game, it's hard to envision him having gone for 25 points, which would have been enough to get you a victory in this one. So, the injury is unfortunate. We'll see what happens going ahead here for Hillbillies on PCP, but I don't think the injury cost you the matchup. Maybe it did, but I'm going to say it's unlikely. So nothing to keep you up at night thinking if only Le'Veon Bell had stayed healthy. Zerline, your kicker, both of our kickers went for about 4.5 points there. And you had the Steelers defense on Monday night at New York Giants. They went for about about 27, I believe, was the total there as well. Although I should mention that our benches, the Isotopes and Hillbillies on PCP, kind of had some decent games there with players on our bench, especially Hillbillies on PCP. The points you needed, really, the points you would have needed to get a win this week are there on your bench. But unfortunately, you went with different players there. If you had started Slayton over Judy, let's see. It looks like there's about a 19-point difference there. So I'm not sure if that would have been just enough to get you ahead. Let's see. You would have, if you had it would have been about 18 and a half. So maybe if you had started Slayton, you would have lost by a half a point, I think. Just doing trying to figure out the numbers here really quickly off the top of my head. But also you had Sammy Watkins go for a pretty good game. And what's his name? Anthony Miller from the Bears. Hawkinson actually did better than Hunter Henry. You had some pretty good scores there. Aaron Rodgers, Naheem Hines for the Isotopes there. You can Chase Edmonds, not a bad game from him. So the points were there, but I'm not sure those players would have made your starting lineup anyway. So here in week 1, live and learn, but you lost Le'Veon Bell for a couple weeks. But that probably won't be a problem for you because you will be able to take one of these wide receivers and plug them in. Really, the only other running back, as I'm taking a look here now, that you have on your bench is Love from the Redskins, who I believe was inactive this past week. He had 0 points there, didn't do anything. So you're currently down to 2 running backs on your entire roster. So we will see what happens going forward with Hillbillies on PCP. If he plugs one of those wide receivers into the flex spot, or if he makes a move on the waiver wire this week. Personally, I don't know if I should divulge this information or not, but it boggles my mind that you had Darius Slayton on your bench because that's a guy that I wanted this year, and I was pretty disappointed whenever you drafted him because I was really hoping to get him, and unfortunately I did not. That was one of the guys. He was on my target list there. So maybe that will give you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside knowing that you sniped somebody that I was hoping to get there. So I think it's always it seems like across the league, it's always a nice, satisfying feeling whenever you do something that disappoints me or causes me a little bit of frustration or pain. But anyway, the Isotopes defeat Hillbillies on PCP. Isotopes are in second place. Hillbillies are in seventh place. So actually, yeah, Hillbillies, you would have beaten any other team. Detling is the only team besides the one you played that you would have lost to this week. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 teams that you could have played in week 1 and had gotten a victory, but I believe Gags was the one who chose the number that we shuffled the schedule, and this is how it turned out. So if you're upset that you had to face the Isotopes in week 1 and got handed a 190, a loss with a 190 score, you can thank Gags, not me. There. So, all right, enough about that. Let's go to one of the most woeful matchup, I think, of the week, which was Darkwing Jet and Close Doesn't Count. Neither team wanted to get a win this week, as Darkwing Jet, he actually does get it. Final score here, 143.1 to 135.4. So, yeah, two scores on the lower end. Here we just talked about Hillbillies getting a loss with 190 points, while Darkwing Jet gets a win with 143 points. But that is just the way it goes. It is what it is, as Gags would say. Darkwing Jet, let's see, he had Carson Wentz go for about 38. His 3 receivers, Beckham Jr., DJ Moore, and Robert Woods. Only 5 for Beckham, 9.5 for Moore, and about 18 for Woods. Christian McCaffrey and Kenyon Drake are his running backs. McCaffrey, pretty standard day for him, 28.5 points, a couple touchdowns, almost 100 rushing yards. I'm not sure how many catches he had, but he had only 38 receiving yards. There will be better days ahead for him, I'm sure, even though 28.5 is a score you'll take more often than not and be happy with. Kenyon Drake, 14.5. Your tight end, Gesicki, from the Dolphins, hoping that he breaks out this season. He did not in week 1, as he goes for only 6. Gallup in your flex, 8 points. Let's see. You kept one of the Buffalo Bills running backs, and you drafted the other one. Both of those guys on your bench. Both of them outscored Gallup, so we will see. You got 4 startable wide receivers there every week, so we will see going forward if, let's see. Gage from the Falcons had a pretty big game. Edwards from the Raiders did not. But you also have Swift there from Detroit, who looks like he scored a touchdown. So maybe perhaps down the road we are here. FC Bahorik, or Darkwing Jet now might have some difficult lineup decisions to make, because as the season wears on, I suspect that both of those Buffalo Bill running backs, if one of them doesn't emerge, at least clearly emerge as better than the other, I think they'll both be pretty solid and startable plays throughout the season. So I don't know, perhaps he'll make a trade with one of them. Perhaps eventually he'll start both of them and move McCaffrey to the flex, maybe trade one of his wide receivers. But he really doesn't have. We'll see how Gage does and Edwards does as the season continues. But having too many good players at a position is a good problem to have. So we will see how. Keep wanting to say FC Bahorik, but we will see how Darkwing Jet handles things going forward. Darkwing Jet, I believe, was finished by Monday night. While Close Doesn't Count, he had Juju, James Conner, Saquon Barkley, and the tight end from Tennessee, Jonnu Smith. So he had 4 guys, and he was down by about 60 points. I mean, you got Saquon, you got Juju, you got Connor there. Definitely plausible. 60 points from 4 guys. That's really only 15 each. So this victory was there, possibly for close doesn't count. But as the name says, close doesn't count. Let's see. He had Drew Brees go for 34. Juju actually, his all 3 receivers, Juju, Edelman, and Devontae Parker. Juju goes for 25, Edelman 13, Parker 8.5. Saquon Barkley, he actually only goes for 12.5 points. He struggled against the Steelers defense there. He only had 6 rushing yards. Almost all of his stats came from receiving. Ingram, surprisingly, only 3 points from him. The Baltimore Ravens running back in a game where they scored 38 points. Kind of surprising there that he was not involved at all, really. I think he had most of those rushing yards pretty early on in the game. So it's kind of a surprise that he didn't get much action. They worked in the other running backs. So that might be a red flag for close doesn't count here going forward in terms of trying to decide if he should start Ingram or not. Going to be a tough call, I think, moving forward. Based, of course, you can't base everything off of week 1, but it certainly isn't looking good for you. Johnny Smith, one of your other Monday night guys, 13.5 points. He scored a touchdown, but perhaps the difference maker here was James Conner. In the flex, he only got you 3.7 before going out of the game fairly early with a sprained ankle. So yeah, in a matchup here where you lost by about 7.5, 8 points, somewhere between 7.5 and 8, all you needed was Connor to get to about 12, which, considering he was a pretty high fantasy pick this year, probably round 2, maybe early round 3, running back with high expectations this year. Of course, he was a keeper for you and a later pick than that, but certainly your expectations for obviously both Saquon and Connor were higher than that. Did Darkwing Jet deserve the victory this week? Perhaps you could argue the answer is no, but it is what it is. Lutz goes for kicker. His kicker goes for about 9 points. The Colts defense actually loses to Jacksonville here. Looks like Yahoo says 7. I'm going to guess their actual score was about 13, something like that. But unfortunately, close doesn't count. Gets the loss because close doesn't count. Perhaps we will be saying that many times this year as we summarize the matchups for close doesn't count. I hope not for your sake, but I also hope so just for my personal sake, because as a manager of my own team, we know who is going to underperform this year. Not saying that you're ever an automatic victory, but we will see as these first few weeks go along whose teams kind of rise and whose teams kind of fall. But we will see. But obviously, it's a pun that works with on your team name there. So, but still, you got Drew Brees, you got Juju, you got Saquon Barkley, you got Gronk on your bench, you got Dak, just in case, you got Jarvis Landry. The Colts defense, I don't know if they were as good as maybe you thought they were. I don't know for sure, but we'll see what happens with them. But it's probably going to say this every matchup. It's week 1, so you don't want to jump the gun here and panic too much, because one game basically, really the first this whole month of September is basically the preseason. We're kind of figuring out which directions our teams are going, how our players are being handled, how they're being used, and how things are going to go here. and hoping that nobody gets hurt, of course. Anyway, Darkwing Jet, he is in 6th place with the victory, while Close Doesn't Count, he is actually all the way down in 12th place, which means here in week 1, Close Doesn't Count, you are the first person eliminated from the knockout pool. So congratulations to you there. All right, next up we had, the closest matchup of the week, Mighty Midgets going up against the Dub C Hooligans. Mighty Midgets held, let's see, a 1.5 point margin going into Monday night. Mighty Midgets had a lead of 1.5, while he was finished. Dubsy Hooligans had Evan Engram just left to go, and I believe this matchup actually came down to the final 2 minutes of the game, because Evan Engram had 1 catch for 4 yards. He needed 5. He got 4. And he made a catch there, a short 5-yarder, just at the very end of the game, and put the Dubsy Hooligans ahead of the Mighty Midgets. So perhaps a few extra gray hairs in the Mighty Midgets beard after this week. Almost getting a victory. Defeat taken from the jaws of victory, or whatever they say. But anyway, Dubsy Hooligans, let's look at him. He had an even 160 points. Both of your quarterbacks went for 69 points. Both Russell Wilson and Matt Ryan. I would imagine, they were both same game. Seahawks, Falcons. Both quarterbacks end up going for 69. Well, Ryan had 69.4. So both over, Wilson over 300 yards, Matt Ryan over 400 yards. Some big matchups there, but almost the exact same scores for your quarterback. Kind of interesting there. Dubsy Hooligans, his wide receivers, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, and DJ Chark. Robinson, just over 12, Kupp an even 8, and 11.5 for Chark. Your running backs, Edwards-Helaire and Boston Scott. I'm going to guess you decided to go against Ronald Jones, who actually looked pretty good. Having watched that game, he didn't get as many opportunities in this one, but because they were behind, but he actually looked pretty good running the ball, so I would feel pretty confident despite Leonard Fournette. If I were you, at least for the time being, I would feel pretty comfortable putting him in the starting lineup every week. Again, Evan Engram, he had those 2 catches for 9 yards, 2.9 points. In the flex, David Montgomery, 8.5 points. Koo, the kicker from Atlanta, he got you about 8.5, 9 points. And then the San Francisco defense, you went with them over Miami, or New England against Miami, I should say. And it almost cost you here because Arizona actually defeated San Francisco, and your score was probably what Yahoo says, 8, because you only got bumped up a real little bit there. But just enough to get past the Mighty Midgets this week. He had, Matt Ryan, again, go for 69.5 points. His receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, CeeDee Lamb, and Deshaun Jackson, because Courtland Sutton was injured and he did not play. You had, we'll get to that. DeAndre Hopkins goes for 32.1, which looks like Hopkins by himself pretty much covered the score of Dub C's 3 wide receivers put together. Lamb goes for 11. Deshaun Jackson goes for 6.5. But Edwards-Helaire had more points by himself than your 2 running backs, Mixon and Eckler. Mixon only 6, Eckler 9.5 compared to Edwards-Hilaire's 23. So yeah, interesting how that played out here. Ertz, he goes for almost 11 points. In the flex, you went with Gibson, the running back from Washington. Only 6.5 points there. Kicker, Robbie Gould from San Francisco. He gets you about 9.5, 10 points. But the big factor here is obviously already mentioned on the lineup a little bit. The Minnesota Vikings defense got absolutely clobbered by the Green Bay Packers. They got you no points according to Yahoo, but unfortunately, since they also lost the game, we had to tack on that -3, which gave you -3. So your actual score, if they got anything, really you lost by 1.5. So you only needed 2 points from your defense. They couldn't give you anything, they couldn't even keep the rushing yards down, nothing. So you went against, you also have the Bears defense, but I mean, those are Minnesota. Why that at home? No reason not to play them and expect to get a couple points, not negative points there. But also you had, I should point out, you have both Philadelphia Eagles tight ends. You had Ertz in your starting lineup. You benched Goddard. Perhaps you'll be putting both of them in, one of them in your flex here as we go along, and take out Gibson. See how unless he starts to perform. Perhaps your best, considering the injuries to the Eagles wide receivers there. I mean, you already have Deshaun Jackson. I'm sure he will probably go to your bench once Sutton is back and healthy, but you might end up starting both of those Eagles tight ends just because they seem to be getting most of the attention from Carson Wentz this year, at least in week 1, than your injury-riddled wide receiver core there. So, yeah, it is what it is. I'm gonna need to get like my own shirt, or like put it somewhere in the background here with it is something that it is what it is to get. We got Gags right here, so he's watching. He knows what it is. He knows what it means. He doesn't mind if we borrow his thunder. So yeah, Mighty Midgets. What can we say? You almost made a victory out of nothing, despite your defense scoring -3. But Evan Engram just got enough at the end of the Monday night game there to give you the loss. You are in 9th place. With the victory, the Dubsy Hooligans are in 4th place. And this should be the final matchup. We had Shawshank Athletics going up against Ed Lager. And this one wasn't really competitive from the get-go. Couple problems with Ed Lager, some injuries there. Players coming into the game, a little bit questionable with injuries, and coming out of the games with some injuries there. A lot of lower scores there for Ed Lager. But fortunately, he gets just enough points to not be the first one eliminated from the knockout pool. But Shawshank Athletics, they get the victory this week. 186.65 to Ed Lager's 137.85. For Shawshank, let's see, he went with Goff, 32 points. His 3 wide receivers are Tyreek Hill, John Brown, and Jamison Crowder. Who would have thought that Crowder would be the number 1 scorer of this group? John Brown would be number 2, and Tyreek Hill would be number 3. Crowder was actually the other long touchdown bonus this week. Let's see. So Hill goes for 15.5, Brown goes for 19, and with that touchdown bonus, Crowder goes for 27.5. Crowder practically covering Ed Lager's wide receivers by himself there. But running backs, we got Chubb and we got Gurley. Surprisingly disappointing performance there from Chubb. Perhaps it was because they were at Baltimore. Tough matchup here. Plus, you got Kareem Hunt, so we'll see how that running back situation plays out going forward. Only 5.5 points. Gurley had a touchdown, 13.5 points for him. Mark Andrews, you had Lamar Jackson in this matchup throwing to your tight end. He had 3 passing touchdowns. 2 of them went to this guy, Mark Andrews. Almost 23 points from him. You went with Fournette at the flex, 3 points from him. Kicker was Prater. Looks like he kicked a bunch of field goals and got you about 11 points. And then the Saints defense actually did pretty well, had a pick 6 against Tom Brady there. Yahoo says 24, but it must have been about 36, I'm going to guess, was about your actual score for your defense there. So pretty good performance from them. You needed it because the 32 is kind of a low score for your quarterback, but some solid wide receiver scores there. Andrews, 2 touchdowns from him, enough to get past Ed Lager this week with his pretty low score of 137. He did have Lamar Jackson go for 50 points, but his wide receivers, Michael Thomas, he has Marquise Brown, hoping for some magic from Jackson to Brown, and he had Ruggs from the Raiders in his lineup this week because Mike Evans was kind of questionable pretty much up to game time, but they decided to play him. So he had an injury, so he was kind of questionable, should you play him or not, take that risk of maybe him not performing well. Really, he didn't. If you look at Mike Evans here, he only had 1 catch. It was a touchdown catch, but it was a 2-yard touchdown catch. I believe it was basically garbage time by then, so he really didn't look too good during the game there. So probably a good call to go with somebody else there, which you did with Ruggs. But unfortunately, Michael Thomas, one of the top picks in this year's draft, was a beast last year, could not be stopped. He actually, surprisingly, only went for 3 catches, 17 yards, and I believe he went out with his ankle injury. It was fairly late in the game, I'm pretty sure. So he was extremely quiet in this matchup before he got injured. So that's going to be a problem for Ed Lager going forward. Last I heard, they think it is a high ankle sprain, and it was a little bit more significant than they initially thought, which is something you don't want to hear, and unfortunate for you. So going forward, we'll see what you do there, losing your one of the number 1 wide receivers in the entire league. Taking a look at your bench, so you got Mike Evans. Hopefully he's healthy again for you. The only other the only other wide receiver on your roster is I believe he's a rookie, Pittman from the Colts there, who went for 3 points this past week. So perhaps you will be jockeying for a wide receiver on the waiver wire here this week. Perhaps it'll be Traquan Smith to back up, to fill in maybe for Michael Thomas if he's out, staying with the Saints receivers there. But anyway, again, Michael Thomas, only 4.5 points from him. Brown, 15 points, not too bad, 5 catches, just over 100 yards. Ruggs, you went with as your 3rd wide receiver, 9.5 points for him. David Johnson, good start for him on Thursday, all the way back on Thursday night. He went for just under 20 points. Kareem Hunt goes for 12, doubling up Chubb. So both of those players from the Cleveland backfield were head-to-head in this matchup, and Hunt goes for actually more points, about double the points that Chubb got. Tight end Austin Hooper, another Cleveland Brown, only got you 3.5 points there. Your flex, Sterling Shepard, goes for 10.5. McManus, your kicker, only 2. And then the Denver Broncos defense lost the game at the end there. Yahoo says 10. I believe that was correct because actually, Ed Lager, you were the only team that I did not have to make any adjustments to this week because only PATs meant there were no other fractional points that needed adjusted there. So yeah, and your score was correct on Yahoo there. So 137.85. So disappointing performance from Michael Thomas and that injury. Going to have Ed Lager here, probably reeling a little bit these first couple weeks of the season. We'll see how he manages going forward. Still got some good pieces to your lineup there. Said Jackson to Marquise Brown. He could pop off for some long touchdowns at any point. David Johnson actually looked pretty good. Maybe he's back to his old form. They kind of went away from him as the game went on, if I recall, on Thursday night. But early on in the game, he definitely looked really good. But they just kind of stopped feeding him the ball. Even though they were behind, they weren't behind, I don't think, by that much that they should have gone away from him as much as they did. But I'm sure there will be better times and better game scripts ahead for David Johnson. Yeah, we'll see what happens with Hooper there. Shepard looked all right. Again, you got Mike Evans on your bench. You'll be able to plug him in. And the rest of your bench, kind of iffy there. So we'll see. I mean, iffy in my opinion. But we'll see what you're able to do there going forward. Ed Lager, he is in 11th place. And with the win, Shawshank Athletics, he is in 3rd place. So, boom, 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 boom. That's everybody here in week 1. Those were all the matchups. So, unfortunately, for a couple of you and a couple of us, some injuries. So it's going to be difficult going forward. That's probably my biggest concern going into like this first week, first month of the season. There's always a lot of injuries because players they've restructured a lot of the preseason stuff, training camp, and it just doesn't seem like a lot of these stars. So they don't really play in the preseason. They just do training camp. And even then, they go a lot lighter, I think, than they used to. So it's always a different beast once you get into actually playing real games. And as we saw, people getting hurt left and right, even before the season started, a lot of us had said, just off the top of my head, like Mike Evans, Miles Sanders, Galladay, but I'm sure there's several others there, players that you just had to keep on your bench because they suffered injuries coming in to week 1 there, which you kind of thought that they wouldn't, having really no preseason, just the training camp that these guys. But it's just going to be a strange year. But again, I said we always have a lot of injuries, and you hope that each one of us probably sits at home every Sunday, fingers crossed, that you're not the team that gets hit with the injury bug that week, because it's just going to happen. I worry that's going to be a lot more prevalent this year, just due to all the different things going on. And like Le'Veon Bell, perhaps not significant season-ending injuries, but injuries here, especially early on, these first couple weeks, where if you can get a couple wins early in the season, as everyone knows, it's really a race to 7. If you can get 3 or 4 wins early on in the season here, you're pretty much cruising to maybe to at least towards the playoff spot there. Of course, I say that, but of course, nothing is guaranteed. If you looked at our projections for a lot of the matchups here before week 1, the projections, a lot of them were extremely close. Everybody's team is solid. This is one of the things that's probably the greatest about Tonto's Demise in general and the league, and kudos to everybody in the league, because it's difficult. It's not easy. You're all good, and you all put together every year. I mean, we used to have some people who you could kind of figure that they were usually kind of iffy on a year-to-year basis. Sometimes they get lucky, sometimes not. But every single guy in the league currently year in and year out, puts together a quality team that could go all the way, and you really don't know who's gonna. There's really no one who there really are currently no teams I look at and think this guy is definitely not going to make the playoffs. Because unless you said some people who are suffering injuries here early on, the Michael Thomas one really jumps out at me right away as a big one here. For Ed Lager, that could give him some problems here going forward. But some of those, if we don't have injuries and we don't have to factor that in, really, the head-to-head matchups, a lot of them could go either way. And that's one of one of my favorite things about the league is the commitment, the strategy, and the thoughtfulness that everyone puts into it. And everybody, you all bring it every year, and it is tough to get through the season. Just even to make the playoffs, it's difficult. It seems like you never know how it's going to go. It's never, the playoffs are never the same 6 people. It's always a pretty good variety. It's a real challenge, I know, especially now that we've added the keepers and things like that. The league is tough, but that's what makes it fun. To go in there and face that challenge and try to push the rock up the hill every year to get to Tonto Bowl and perhaps be raising the trophy at the end of the season here. So, all right, great week 1, a lot of good matchups. Hopefully, it's a couple close matchups, and we will see what happens going forward. Once again, first team out of the knockout pool is Jay. Close doesn't count. Going forward here. Taking a quick look at week 2. Teams that are 1-0. Let's see. We've got Isotopes going against Possum. 2 0-1s. Hillbillies versus Close doesn't count. Dub C and Darkwing Jet both 1-0 going against each other. Their projections are pretty close. I just said that before. Just here looking at the week 2 projections, Hillbillies and Close doesn't count. Their projections are only 2 points apart. Dub C and Darkwing Jet only 1 point. Never mind. I'm sorry. Once 177. 177 though. I thought it was closer than that. 6 points, but still, that's pretty close. We got Disco going up against Shawshank. Disco obviously 0-1, but he's actually about a 20-point favorite. Actually this week, I guess I'm putting my foot in my mouth here because this week a lot of the projections aren't very close right now. Yinzers versus Ed Lager, a 16-point projection in favor of Yinzer Jags, and Mighty Midgets versus Gags to Riches. Looks like Mighty Midgets are actually favored by about 16 points. So even though Midgets are 0-1, they're heavily favored in this matchup. Midgets 0-1, they're favored. Disco's 0-1, but he's favored by a lot. So we'll see what happens here. Going to be an interesting season. Like everybody's teams, hoping that we stay healthy with no big problems with COVID, and that we make it through the season. And every week we are back here doing the recap, listening to the podcast, ribbing each other for all the sorts of stuff that we usually do, and having a good time as always. Okay, this has been long enough. My throat hurts because I am definitely not used to talking this much at all since last December. Since we last spoke here in front of my computer. It's probably the last time I've spoken this many words in a 70-minute span here. So I gotta go ice my throat and and hopefully, as the weeks go along, hopefully get my strength back up here, that I'm able to get the vocal cords back into playing shape. All right, guys. thanks for watching or listening or whatever you do. For if anybody actually made it this far, but anyway, good luck to everyone here coming up in week 2 and the rest of the season. Hopefully, no injuries and everyone's teams meet or exceed expectations. I think I don't know if I said that last year or the year for these past 2 years, but we will skip the good luck to everyone, but especially me. I think other people have they like to use that, and I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't want to test the fantasy gods anymore with such things like that, wishing luck upon myself. So I would much rather conclude every episode, I think, as I probably think I might have been for a while, that hopefully, said once again, hopefully all of your teams meet or exceed expectations this week. So, and no injuries. So, good luck to all of you. We will probably be back here, unless something crazy happens. You never know. 2020 has been an up and down ride. Mostly down. But, yeah. See you guys next week, and good luck to all here in week 2. Thanks, guys.